Stand by for action.
Thanks for joining. My name is David. I am the Unpleasant Blind Guy. This time, the Way Back Commentaries for 2015 continues as the underground professor, the Reverend Michael E. Jones, and I discuss teaching tactics and other issues surrounding the Way Back. You bring up a point about doing that, which is, I know there are a lot of angry people out there, and we've got darn good reason to be angry, but just getting in somebody's face and saying, well, you ought to teach this stuff this way, you jerk, that's not going to get you anywhere. I'm not, sorry, my British friends, but I'm not a huge fan of the Beatles, only because their stuff just got vastly overplayed over here. But, from their song Revolution, if you go around, I'll rephrase it a little bit. If you go around acting like a dirtbag and yelling in people's faces and being disrespectful, you're just going to close their minds against you. And that's why I try to approach some things the way I do, even from a perspective viewpoint, a progressive viewpoint. I try to let progressives know that, for instance, what's going on now with the progressive Muslim control base will not serve them and their needs. It's not about it's not so much about how it's a bad thing for conservatives or libertarians. It's about how it's a bad thing for progressives. It's kind of like how. Have you ever heard of the guy in Las Vegas who has the trained cats? He's got a troupe of trained cats that he has a show with on stage in Las Vegas. Have you heard of this guy?
Yeah, weren't they gay and one of them got eaten by one of them? No.
You're thinking of another couple of guys, and they use tigers. This is
Siskel and Ebert or something like that.
No, not them. This is a single guy. His daughter helps him in his act, and they have house cats, domestic cats that they train to do stuff. Now, his method to get them to do what he wants them to do is he goes to the shelters and he picks out the cats, and he trains them to do the things that they already like to do anyway. Okay. He doesn't try and train a house cat to do something that it doesn't want to do. If you're not familiar with house cats, if a cat doesn't want to do something, you're going to have a really hard time training it to do that. But if it already likes doing something, then you're halfway there. And that's what he does. He trains the cats to do the things that they like to do. In other words, he gets on their level as far as, this cat may like to jump from one platform to the next one, so he trains them to do that. And they do it because they like to do it anyway. Okay.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
My father always said, though, that a cat has staff and dogs have masters.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So when you approach someone like an educator or just someone, let's say somebody at work, Gieske's told me about, this guy at work that's this big progressive that's always popping off. If you have somebody at work like that, you can approach them and just say, okay, well, all right. Now, you're for massive welfare, and okay, you and I can argue over whether or not that's a good thing. But how about the fact that President Obama wants to import 100,000 combat-age men from the Middle East? I mean, is that not going to make for less welfare for the indigenous people of the United States, for American Indians, and for black people? Is that not going to hurt the people that are already here? In other words, teach it.
You got to hit them at their level. I always ask them why all these able-bodied men are coming here, and it's too dangerous to bring their wives and children with them, so they leave them in the war zone that they're fleeing.
Exactly. Yes. That's another good way of doing it. I've got a friend. He doesn't mind that I call him this, so I'm just going to say it. I've got a friend. That I call Paranoid Paul. He's not very political, but when he thinks about politics, he's fairly well on point. And he calls these guys cowards. He says, well, why are that they're young men of fighting age? Why the heck are they leaving the area? If your side is losing, find another side to fight on. Don't go off somewhere else. The message has to be tailored to the person, and that's something that the left does, Prof, very well. As you know, they've got messages for kids through things like Sesame Street. They've got tons of messages for preteens and teens through things like MTV and popular music. They've got messages for the older people, in the form of some of their people that they trot out from Hollywood and the old music days. They've got plenty of messages for them, and they've got messages for the 18 to 50 crowd as well, with some of the television programs they right, yeah. One of their great means of messaging, as we know, is through television. And I was talking to Kel about this earlier. I used to like the show, The Big Bang Theory, but it went hard left messaging a long time ago. I can't even watch the show anymore. But it has a wide appeal to that 18 to 50 crowd. And that's what they do. They have a message for everyone of almost every interest. And those are the kinds of things that we have to develop on the right when we're teaching people about this stuff.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, they lost me when they started marrying each other and coming out of the closet and pushing. They got famous enough that they could change the direction of the show from just being funny to being a political statement, and that lost it. Same with Seth Rogen, is the stuff he's constantly doing and saying, and it's just such idiocy, like the thing about Ben Carson. So I won't see another Seth Rogen movie, and that's too bad because I really liked his stuff. But the problem is we don't seem to have anybody that's offering a difference. And when we do, when you get things that are being offered, like religious movies, they aren't correct, or they're preachy, and they're not. Now, I don't know about you, but when you watch Cecil B. DeMille, and he gets a lot of things wrong, but when you watch his Ten Commandments, you don't really feel like you're being preached to.
No,
you know what I mean?
No, you feel like you're being entertained. And I'll give you another one real quick, Prof. To your point, I'll give you another one real quick. And that was that mini-series, The Bible. Now, the guy that put that thing together was an Obama supporter. But that's dynamite entertainment.
I haven't seen it yet.
Do yourself a favor and watch it. It's probably on your Netflix or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I
have
had
it
a look.
on there saved. He was an Obama supporter. I thought the devil looked like Obama in that thing.
Well, that's what people said, But the point is, I took a look. I took my own look at the ratings for the nights that thing was on, and it destroyed everything in its path. People loved it, and the production values were first rate. Absolutely, it was very entertaining. And again, just as you said, as far as the DeMille movies go, you didn't feel like somebody was preaching at you, and yet the message was very good. I would say to anybody, do yourself a favor and watch that if you can manage it. Heck, even the DVD isn't that expensive. I want to get it for myself because it's exactly the sort of thing you're talking about, Prof. It's not preachy, and yet it is very inspiring. So there you go. Back to you.
So now, when I was listening to parts 1 and 2, I kept thinking we need to add Bastiat's books, like And then you made good on your revisions. So yes, you put Bastiat in there in part 3. Did I not hear his name?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. You did. Bastiat, Locke. And again the precursors to our Bill of Rights. I put those in as well.
Yes.
Because people have to know how the American Republic started. They have to know where all that. Yes, how and why, and they have to realize this wasn't just made out of whole cloth. That this began with our Constitution in a way began with the 12 Tables of Roman Law, and the Bill of Rights in a way began with the Magna Carta. But there's a whole line of stuff that goes all the way down to the 17th century that they had to build on in order to create all that.
Right.
So people of the future will need this so that they're not saying, oh, the great founders of the American Republic did sit in Philadelphia in a hot, sweaty room and did poop this greatness out of their rear ends. No, that's
that came out of their cat's behind, evidently, according to you.
Yeah. But if they do that, then there's bound to be somebody sitting on the side going, "Oh, come on, nobody's that good." But if you give
exactly. I think I have every book you listed.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you still talking. I apologize.
Well, no, I'm just going to say, if you give them the information of how they came to that, then suddenly those framers become human as the people that are going to be setting up the republic at a time that we know not.
Right, the next time. Yeah. I agree.
Exactly.
And of course they'll be flawed too, but hopefully they can do what the founders did. The founders learned from the mistakes of those in the republics of the past, and they refined political science. And I would like to think that the next generation that has to do this will learn from the mistakes the founders made, pay a little more attention to the anti-federalists and stuff. So you would want to add the anti-federalist papers, Cato's papers, etc.
Yes,
letters to the farmer,
farmer
from the Pennsylvania. I've been doing the B Team series on the Founding Fathers. I think a lot of their writing we probably ought to tuck in there somewhere. But did you mention C.S. Lewis?
You know what? You're right. That would be a great one. But this ties in right here, Prof. You've already, through the talks we've had, you've contributed a couple of things, and not just these writers. C.S. Lewis is great, by the way. But you've talked about buying large, like large numbers of some of these things and passing them out. You've also talked about creating little small, as you said, Minuteman pamphlets that you can just hand out that won't be really big things. Stuff that you can just kind of carry along in your coat. And if we do have a repressive government and you talk to someone and you think you can trust them, you go, hey, here, I got something for you. Here you go. And it might have one of Cato's letters in it, or something like that. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about making individualistic choices, along with the other stuff that I suggested.
Yes. Yep. And I figured we might as well include some of the stuff from the Ink Spots since you included Tolkien. I figured, well, you better balance that with C.S. Lewis, and there is one book I think that may be instrumental, and that is, if someone wants to understand what government is, it would be called The Basic American Government by Carson. And I don't even know if it's still in print anymore, but it was how I learned what I know. Most of what I know came out of that book and the 5,000-Year League, of course.
Now, is that a textbook?
Huh? It's a textbook, yeah.
Okay. No,
like from the 70s or something, So it's pre-polluted textbooking. And that's what I'm talking about. In other words, it's a good old-fashioned civics book. Right. The way they used to be. And you mentioned that. I think I remember you saying that we needed to beat the 70s or 60s so that we could get stuff that hasn't been modified completely by the Fabian socialists.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I said, basically anything before about, 1970, certainly anything before the 80s.
Right.
Some of the stuff in the 70s is okay, but, it's by the 70s, this is when I went to school, and, it's more or less when you went to school. I think we're about the same age. Things were already starting to be modified, but only in that they were not as complete as they could have been. American history books, Texas history books. Of course, I went to school in Texas, and we learned Texas history, boy. Those kinds of things that are not, it's not that things were turned around or anything of that nature, but some things just weren't included. I think in order to make the curriculum move faster or something like that. And who knows? That could have very well been the beginning of the modification of these things over a few generations. But I'd say certainly anything before 1970.
I think I would also add Parson Weems' book on what's the title of it? I think I've got a copy of it here. I do. Let me see if I can find it again. It's on The Life of Washington by Parson Weems. You remember the Parson Weems fable about can't tell a lie, chopping down the cherry tree and all that? He's the one that started that. But I think that book would be great for an illustration. And we did that book study a couple of years ago on here. But it'd be a good way of illustrating how new governments need their myths to promote the correct and moral ideologies of it. Not out and out lies like the Soviet Union did to promote what it thought was good about its system, but the morals of not lying, and telling the truth, and that's why everybody could trust George Washington to do the right thing. The man was a consummate liar and a spy master. And everybody knew this when Parson Weems wrote his book right after the death of Washington. But people immediately bought into this myth, even though they knew the truth, because of the morals it was teaching. And teachers across this country used that as a textbook, teaching their kids, knowing that they were teaching their kids a lie about George Washington, but that the message was more important. And it was inculcating our children with morals and ethics, and that's what they were using it for. And I think we should do that. And I think I would add one other thing, just for fun, because we don't want to bore everybody to death in the future when they're trying to save the country. But I think without them knowing it, a surprise series of books, just virtually any Robert A. Heinlein book, Starship Troopers, A Door into Summer, those books should all be included. So it'd be fun, but you'll also learn about government through the back door.
Well, hang on a second, because I was waiting for you to end your selection there, because I was going to suggest The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein.
Sure.
In that one, for those who don't know, we're doing our science fiction series now that we were going to do. In that one, it is a story of how the moon, which was a protectorate of the planet Earth, obviously, broke away from Earth and formed Luna Free State. It formed its own independent country. And there's some very fascinating things in there about the realities of revolution, the mechanics of revolution, and yes, there's some. He talks about myths in there as well. Robert A. Heinlein, as far as his persona goes, was kind of a freakazoid, but he did do some pretty good predictive science fiction. There's that book, and yes, as you say, Starship Troopers. I have to tell you, Prof, if I were president, that's pretty much exactly how I'd run the military.
Textbook. That's right, and how I would get voting.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yes, absolutely. That's actually been discussed. Mean, basically, if you don't serve, you don't vote.
I'd be okay with that, but I'd also be okay with if other than veterans, if you get a paycheck from the government, then you should not be able to vote to increase your paycheck. So I think anybody that's a politician and anybody on welfare should not be allowed to participate in an electoral process.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could kind of refine that a little bit, but a lot of ideas that Heinlein puts out, some of them are just flat out freaky, and a few of them just kind of make you go.
Kind of L. Ron Hubbard-ish.
Yeah, but he does. In the two books we're talking about, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and The Starship Troopers, you do get a good and interesting sense of where his head is at regarding government and the future, and it's very pragmatic, and it's entertaining.
Yeah. Don't forget Dora in the Summer, right? That's the one where the kids, they go into an alternate planet and they get trapped, so they have to create their own government from scratch. It's kind of a Lord of the Flies thing.
Actually, that's not a bad one. But I think what you're talking about could be Pebble in the Sky. People might have to look for that.
Oh, am I getting them confused? It's been a long time, but you know what? I'm going to go buy them all now so I can start reading them again on Kindle.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's you're exactly right, though. If Pebble in the Sky is the title, that is what happens. What happens for, again, this is for people who don't know, young people who are about to graduate high school, or in some cases college, have to pass a kind of a survival course. It's kind of a weekend deal. They send them off to a planet that they're not familiar with, and they have to survive for a weekend. No big deal, right? Except something happens with the transportation system that sent them out there, and they're stuck for a couple of years. They have to form their own government. They have to form associations, alliances, stuff like that. And yes, that's a great book you thought of, because in there things could have gone either way. I mean, they could have all turned into, they could have turned into a bunch of, roving gangs and stuff like that. But what they wound up doing was setting up an actual town with law enforcement and manufacturing.
Well, the way you should word it is that they set up civilized society with a social compact, as opposed to might makes right. Yes. I'm holding up my Second Amendment coin. For those of you on Periscope can see it. It's copper. And it's really cool looking, I think. Yep. And it's a $2 copper coin. I like these. For those of you who want species in the future to, turn on ag, to protect yourself so you can buy things. I always have this. Every show I have this. I'm usually nervously fondling it while I'm thinking. Gives my hands something to do and keeps them out of my nose. All right, Harris here. We got everybody in the back here. So there's some boys out in my field playing football, and here you go, Harris. Yeah. And so that's why those kids were barking earlier. The dogs were barking earlier. All right, so we're talking with Agador, the unpleasant blind guy. Over the Way Back, a series we've been doing. And we're talking about modern books. And one of the things I think, instead of saying what I would include, one of the things I would not include are any of the books by the exalted one, Rush Limbaugh, or Glenn Beck, or even, what's his name, the other one, Mark Levin. Really? I've read all their books, and none of them would I want to put into a package to save the country because of the way they're designed and what they talk about. What do you think?
So you would not include, now I've got to say, I have my issues with Glenn Beck, and that's well known. But I have to say that I have learned a couple of historical things from him, like, what initiated the Wounded Knee Massacre, and I have to say that I'm very appreciative of that. But I have not actually sat down and read any of his books. So, I would appreciate knowing why you wouldn't want to put any of his books or the others in, just, for my own edification and for that of the listeners.
Well, I'll tell you, here's why. What do they focus on? Limbaugh's books, like See, I Told You So and stuff, are things that he talked about on the radio show, but mostly they point out the faults of progressivism and liberalism. And if we're at the point where we're having to restore a constitution that's dead and a progressive Muslim type country, then I don't think that argument needs to be made anymore. I think the argument needs to be made of why a republic, not why everybody else is wrong. And a lot of these end up having political statements that they put in that are just that, and they're politics. They're not I have a definition I call creative politics and innuendo politics, and that they fall into mostly that. Now, creative politics today, at the time of the revolution, may very well have fallen into innuendo politics. I mean, things like Thomas Paine,
right,
the Declaration of Independence, they were all innuendo politics, but they also served another point, and they were creative. They were creating a new world order, and that's what they were trying to do, something that had not been done before, a republic that had never existed in history. And they were very successful at what they did, in creating a more perfect union, not a perfect one. But when I look at these things that they write, I don't see anything in it that is a concept that we need to rebuild and that the entire book would be worth having. In order to do one of these, I think the entire concept of the book must run through, and so, because books aren't cheap, and they're big and cumbersome, and
right.
And so you would want them to be worth the effort of hauling around and secreting and hiding and reading and memorizing and teaching. So I don't think that we need that. Now, there's that one book, I don't remember, I've got it up here on the shelf, that he does. As an Indian, I already knew about Wounded Knee, but the concepts of the book were that government does a lot more wrong than we give it credit for, and we get that. But I don't know is that I would stick that in.
That's it for this time. Next time, the Way Back Commentaries 2015 continues with the Underground Professor.
Agador and the Underground Professor, both sitting high atop a double rainbow, gaily swinging our feet over the Hermitage of North Texas's liberal conservative studies. This has been copyrighted in the year of your Lord 2015, via con carne for the Agadorable fans and via con toodles for mine.
I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, and may your God go with you. Goodbye. The Unpleasant Blind Guy is copyright 2015, Anno Domini.